Hello everyone, welcome to the very first episode of Cash Me Out, a Q&A series where we sit with the people behind the projects and tools here at Carbonteq. I am Mohammad Arsal, alongside me is Umar Hamid. So first of all, the topic of our discussion would be design systems that scale. Have you ever wondered why there are different buttons, different styles, different colors at different websites? That is what design system is about.
And don't worry, if you've never heard of design systems, much like Ursal, this session will be very beginner friendly, so you can follow along.
So, Umar, what are design systems and why did we initiate them?
Right. So tackling the first part of this question, design systems, you can think of design system as like a recipe book that standardizes UI elements. So stuff like text, fonts, colors, and components. You have like a standard way of dealing with all of them. This is what a design system is. So there was a gap that needed to be bridged. So initially, the first tool that came out to fix this problem, that realized that this was actually a problem, was Zeppelin. So what designers did was that they exported their designs to Zeppelin, and then they like specified certain things about the design system in that tool, and then they handed that design system off to the developers. And after this came Figma, which is a tool that we all love. I'm sure you do as well. And yeah, so in that tool, the whole process of like the developer and the designer communication became very easy. You have like dev mode in Figma and you have designer mode as well. So the whole process of the design system handoff is like quite seamless and easy to follow along. So the key principle like behind design systems, I would say, is visual consistency. So all the components, like the buttons you talked about, the gaps, the shadows, the spacing, all of it needs to look consistent in the mind of the user and from a design perspective as well.
Okay. So what is this tokens term about? What is this?
Right. So you can think of tokens as like the building blocks of design systems. So a token is like, it represents like a design choice. So let's say if I have a brand, let's say I have a clothing brand. I pick the color of that clothing brand to be represented as blue. So my color, like the one that I would see on the billboard, would be blue. Good color?
Yeah, perfect.
Right, thank you. So the color is blue, but when you want it to be designed, you would not want that particular hex value of that color to be used everywhere. So what you do is you define that color as your primary color. So everywhere in the designer references that as the primary color, and the dev sees that as the primary color. So there's some semantic and like contextual meaning attached to that hex value.
Okay, so before I move on to the next question, what hex code is this shirt?
I think it's black, so it's pretty obvious. It's #000. Let me just first, before that, explain what different types of tokens exist as well. So there are like four tokens, four different layers of tokens, different abstractions of tokens. So these are the first layer, which is like the raw hex values I talked about. So these have like no meaning, contextual meaning. The next layer is like the semantic tokens. So these give like contextual and semantic meaning, obviously, to those tokens, and everywhere with the reference they have some context behind it, like the color primary I talked about. So the next level of tokens, next abstraction, is the integration tokens. So these again help us contextualize the UI components that we're using across the application. And the next level of the tokens is the component level tokens. So these are, like the name suggests, used in our components for flexibility and styling and stuff like that. So these are the type of tokens. Right?
Okay,
Yeah.
so is this the perfect approach?
No. So as I just explained about the abstractions, what ends up happening is, since there's so much abstraction, you have a lot of control, but at the cost of simplicity. So everything is quite complex. And I'll go into further details about the pain points of this as well. But like just as a reference, basically you have like a lot of different tokens defined somewhere, right? And if the component level tokens are referencing semantic tokens and the semantic tokens are referencing something else, if even a tiny change, it causes a lot of friction with the developer team, right? So a tiny change could cause a lot of different tokens at different levels to be modified. So this causes friction. And what ends up happening is that the designers are confused as to what to do, the developers are overwhelmed, and like the whole design system, eventually it becomes inconsistent, which is wrong because the very reason it was invented was to stop this inconsistency. So yeah.
So what's the real culprit here?
So the real culprit, like my conversation points out as well, are the component level tokens. So let's say you have a team working on some part of an application. You have another team working on a different part of the application. They're both developing different components. And since the component level tokens are context specific to those components, you can have different tokens in different places. For example, you can have a card padding small and a panel padding small. So even though these both reference the same thing, these are like repeated and redundant inside the code, right? So even if you add like another component, you would need a new set of these tokens. So this like whole thing becomes like quite difficult for the dev to follow and like for quite difficult to follow along with as well.
Okay, so is this the only issue?
No. So the other issue is basically spacing. So in case you don't know, spacing is like what you have between pages or between sections or between cards inside a website or a mobile app. So let's say you have spacing defined as 14px is someplace, right? 14px is a very common thing. I'm sure all of you are familiar. And let's say one day I'm not feeling well. So I forget what value I used in one component, and in the other component I end up using, even though it's like referencing the same thing, I end up using 12px. So these are what we call magic numbers. And these should not be inside our code, because let's say if I want to add consistency and want to update these values to be something else, I would have to go into every individual piece where these magic numbers are used, and I would have to update them. So like this causes a lot of unnecessary developer work. So these spacing tokens are also absent in most design systems, which is also a pain point.
Okay, so how did Carbonteq solve this problem?
Right. So here we introduce our internal product, which is Palace UI. So Palace UI obviously is a design system. So what it does is basically it eliminates the whole component level like tokens, like they're gone. So what you actually end up doing is, instead of using all those different tokens, like defining them everywhere and like jumbling up the code, you end up just having a declarative variant based approach. So instead of all these things, you just say that I'm going to use a primary button, right? So the component, instead of having to pass a lot of different options for, like, for example, button padding this small, button padding medium, you just define the color to be something, and like the system handles the rest of it. So all the hard thinking and all the heavy thinking is offloaded to the system, and you just need to worry about the components themselves.
Okay, so earlier you mentioned about the spacing issue. Is this covered in this?
Yes. So Carbonteq is literally the Palace UI is literally the first library that uses semantic level spacing tokens. So what that basically means is, instead of having those magic numbers, you have things like layout spacing small and section spacing large. So these values, these things add context. And if I haven't like emphasized enough, context is necessary to understand what a number or a hex value represents. So it is a very like key concept behind design system. And what this semantic scale that Palace UI does is that basically introduces that context. So by looking at the layout padding small or layout space large, you can understand what this exact token is referencing or what it means.
So what was the impact about it?
I mean, obviously we're seeing very positive results. We were able to onboard developers quicker, the designers saw less inconsistencies, and the teams were able to ship faster. So yeah.
Okay, so how does it benefit me?
Right. So the main benefit comes from users like you yourself, users who don't really know what they're doing and who are not really familiar with design systems. So since everything is so composable and easy to follow along, you don't really need to know anything about the internals. You can just dive right in and start, and you can just pick options, and everything, and the output and the results obviously will be clean, consistent, and on brand. Another thing is that everything, like even the changes, like let's say you want to change your brand color at some point. I gave an early example that I chose the brand color as blue. Let's say I choose red now. I can easily change that without causing any friction, which we saw earlier as well.
So in my opinion, it's like, instead of learning everything for a music instrument, let's just say piano from scratch, I can just jump into it with an auto-tune.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And another thing I would like to point out for you tech geeks out there, if you don't know what I'm talking about, you don't need to worry. So in case you have like multiple products that are using the same design system or a multi-product design system, this design system has that functionality baked in as well. So you have themability and extensibility baked into this as well, and they are like the core concept of this as well. So you're very easily able to adapt this for multi-product design systems as well.
Okay, so is there some sort of base knowledge I should know before I jump into it?
I mean, generally you don't really need to know much. The core thing is like, even if you don't know anything, you're good to go. But if you have like an understanding of components and props, an understanding of what layout is, what spacing is, and if you've worked with something like Tailwind or Chakra UI in the past, that really helps you. But generally it's like very easy to follow along, and you can just jump right in and learn along the way as well.
Okay, so how exactly would I use it?
Here's what our design system would look like in a next step.
So I've just created a very simple next tab, and in the root page, I have imported some of the already existing components from Palace UI along with some layout primitives. And right off the bat, you're able to see that in these primitives, I'm using our own token system that we have defined. So instead of having to say, let's say, like the padding should be 16px, I'm saying that the layout, the padding should be the section padding median. And the benefit of this is that instead of having to guess like magic numbers, you're able to define everything clearly, and it's all like pretty self-explanatory and self-documenting as well. So anyone that works on the system is just able to guess what that means and able to use it correctly as well. So like right off the bat, you're able to see the main thing about this, which is the predictability factor. So it's everything is like predictable, and you're not relying on any magic numbers or anything like that. You're just using the design system and the base token system that you have defined, and you're being able to work consistently with everything. And again, in the flex and like in the flex, you can see that I'm using the same tokens as well. The other thing that you should focus on is like the buttons and the input components that we have defined. So for the button, you're able to see that I can define variants, and that's pretty much it. Like I don't need to mess with the CSS in any way, shape, or form, and I can just define the variants, and all the values for the tokens and like everything about the button is just picked from the design system, and it just works out right out the bat. So you have a theme aware, everything is like theme aware and token aware, and you're just able to use it right off the bat without having to worry about making everything consistent. The same goes for the input as well. So you're not with the input, you're able to see that you have defined a prefix and the text, and you're able to just like use it consistently. So right off the bat, you're describing everything the way it is and not how it looks. So with this, and the benefit of this then is that you're able to, if you, let's say for example, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast as well, if you change some of the base tokens further down the line, you're not gonna change everything like in the individual files. The components work so that they pick the token color that you have defined as the primary, and then they just work. So you're not having to worry about everything at like the very base level, and you're at a high level just able to work with it, and it ensures that everything is consistent with your UI that you have defined. And then talking about, let's say, we talk about the button component. If I want to extend it to add another variant, it is pretty easy for us to do that as well. So so let me just go to the button recipe. And from here, you can see that we have already an existing set of variants defined. And if I want to just add like a new variant, let's say a destructive variant. So from destructive, we can pretty much gauge that the colors and everything being used would be like the error colors or the error tokens that we have defined. So let me just paste this code. And yeah, as you can see that we're using like the error tokens for everything. And again, it's picking everything from our token system, so we don't need to worry about like changing the colors further down the line. If you just update an error value, the value would be updated for everything that is using that token value as well. So it like works in that regard as well. And yeah, now if I just want to add like a destructive button, which I just created the variant for, I can just simply do button, and I can do the variant, and I can add the variant for the destructive button. As you can see, it's suggested to me. And if I just click on save, you're able to see that I've just added a new destructive button that I'm able to see in my app as well on the website. So yeah, everything just works, it's consistent, and everything is predictable. So that is like the core offering. And yeah.
So to wrap it up, guys, traditional design systems were powerful but complex.
And Palace UI basically strips away the noise, no more overwhelming layers, everything is clean and easy to follow along.
Okay, so thanks for tuning into Design Systems. That is it for now. Until then, keep your tokens meaningful and your buttons clean. Thank you.